Hello, everyone. So, welcome to another one of our weekly events where we'll be discussing about a plethora of events ranging from gaming, metaverse, quantum computing, space, and whatnot. Today, we are going to be having a discussion on role of marketing in startups. I'm Pranesh Sharma, and I'm going to be the host for today's event. I take pleasure in inviting Franco Ciulla. Excuse me if I spelled that wrong. He has been a leader in DevOps, also a problem solver in A Francisco de Modo Develop. We at Start Now would love to interact with him and understand his journey. So, we welcome you once again to our event, and it's an honor to us to receive you despite COVID scenarios you described. We people of Start Now hope for your recovery. For those of you who are new to our server, Start Now is a community that was created in order to help young entrepreneurs develop successful startups through valuable guidance from our guests. So feel free to ask questions to Francesco Sir. Just type in your name in the event chat section with a question so we'll be able to queue you and you will be invited to the stage. I'd also like to mention to our audience that the recording for this event would be posted on a YouTube channel. So do check out our YouTube channel, Start Now. So without further ado, let's get started with the event with some questions that we people have cultured. We welcome you once again, sir.
Nice, nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been a great introduction. I also like your setup, your camera, so I like it a lot. So welcome. Should I introduce myself or just go straight into the topics, whatever?
Yes,
So
sir. We'd like to hear your introduction first so that we can go. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So, hi everyone. I'm Francesco. I'm 38 from Rome, Italy, and I'm currently very active on both Web3 and DevOps world, especially Docker. But I am also a developer advocate for Daily.dev, which is a company that I've been working for more than 6 months. I'm just back from a company gathering, in-person gathering, in there a couple of weeks ago, 1 week ago. And so, yes, I've grown, I think, our audience on Twitter lately in the last couple of 2 years. So for now, I'm mostly active on Twitter and YouTube. I also live stream on Twitch when I have time. And I'll also be a public speaker soon in at least 2 or maybe 3 events so that are related to Web3 and DevOps too. I'm preparing a talk for the DockerCon upcoming on May. And so there we go. Let's get started. So, should I get the questions somewhere? Should we talk about just to have an idea?
Uh, um, our question to you, like, first of all, will be like, can you please explain this field of DevOps to us? Like, many of us like are familiar with this word, but we have no clue like what it is and why is it trending right now.
Okay. So let's start with DevOps because they are not. Let's say that DevOps and Web3 are not strictly related. I come from the DevOps world to Web3, so this is a good way to do that. So basically, DevOps is basically a mix of two words: developer and development and operations. So this has been, let's say, a trending word. This is also a buzzword. But what I really think that is to have an idea about the DevOps world. There are so many tools. First of all, there are so many tools that they can't fit in a page. There are like so there are so many tools. What I highly recommend is, as always, is to start from the basics. So understand the containerization, understand what Docker is. If you've ever heard the word Docker, probably you are already on the right path. So so yes, there is a lot of stuff to do if you want to be a DevOps engineer. I think that having some DevOps knowledge is important, especially for backend developers, but also in front end because they always interact. And at the end of the day, it's always about speed. So we can make also a small introduction about what are containers, what are the difference between a virtual machine. I don't know if you want to go on the technical details, but let's say that the good way to start is to start understanding the concepts. So what is a container? What's an image? What's the difference? Why since 2013, 2015, people have started using container so much because it's containers are not something super new, but when Docker kicked in, I'm also a Docker captain. We can talk about what is that. It's not a title I gave to myself. It's basically an ambassador program by Docker. And so having, as I said, having the basics, and the important thing is that in 2015, 2013, when Docker became a thing, we can say it was an open source project, it gave a standard to containerization. And to say this in a very fast way, basically we switched from using just virtual machines, which still have some use cases for sure, but for many cases, basically we just want to put our application somewhere. So we want to put our application on some remote server. And to do that, we don't need a whole operating system. We want maybe something more lightweight. And containers are exactly like that. The containers, it's not a buzzword, but let's say it's you can think about that. I like two definitions of containers. One is more technical, one is more logical. From a logical point of view, it's a single unit of working software. So it does something, authentication, it does one thing. And from a technical perspective, is a process. It's a Linux process. So Docker runs natively on just Linux. You can also use it on Windows or Mac using something which is called Docker Desktop. There are also some great upcoming changes. We will soon see this in the upcoming DockerCon, which is on May. I think I'll be there. I'm preparing something for there. So this is like a very small introduction. Then I make demos, I make live streams. Feel free. I don't know. I don't see the questions, so I think you have to tell them to me. Just tell me how would you like this to go.
Good afternoon, sir. I have a question for you to ask. Yeah. So I've recently heard that Amazon Web Services, that is AWS, is very useful in DevOps. So how would you say that how well it is and how well useful it is? Like, what are the actual roles and significant contributions of AWS?
Yeah, I have a whole series about AWS because I've been a developer advocate for another company founded by people who worked on the Amazon, the AWS CLI. So I have a series, but not on my channel because I worked for them as a developer advocate. And what AWS does, I am a fan of AWS, by the way. What AWS does, it gives you a lot of support when you want to work with containers. I don't want to go super technical, but for example, if there is someone who is already worked a bit with containers, they have a private registry. A container registry, an images registry is like a GitHub. So it's like a place where you store the images, okay? So, for example, they have their own repository. They help you also with a graphical interface. The problem is that if you don't understand the basics, you can get stuck very easily. Instead, if you understand the basics of containerization, you can either switch between the cloud providers. But if you want to pursue a career in AWS, I think that it's totally valid. I don't know if it's worth to get certificates, but I think this is actually the most high in demand position. Usually companies, they don't want you to be an expert on 4 cloud providers. They want just one or maybe 2, but I think just one, the one they use the most, the one they are currently using. And I think that if you go with AWS, you can't be wrong. So this is my answer. Of course, it depends, but I think it is a very solid path. The problem can be that with AWS, it's the learning curve process. It's a bit tight. So maybe at the beginning you get a bit shocked. So this can be the problem with AWS. For example, I've also deployed with DigitalOcean and also Azure. And deploying the first service, it has been easier. But if you want, you can follow some of my videos that when I start from scratch, and I teach you, for example, how to deploy an image, how to put an image on a AWS registry, which is called the CR. and then also run a container from the image.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I've seen your YouTube channel also. I really like the channel. So one thing I have to ask, like, since the logo of DevOps is like an infinity signal, so there are like some steps involved in that process. Like we have to plan, code, build. So can you like explain us like these process which are involved?
Yes. So basically, when you want to deploy, let's say that DevOps is especially useful in the what we call the day two operations. So and before DevOps, people were still deploying software. So the problem is in the maintaining a software. So we spent a lot of time in maintaining a software, keeping it up, rollback problems. So the first day that you deploy something, you can also do this without DevOps. Many people still do this, or maybe they do this later. The problem is that when you deploy something, then in the 99.99% of the real world application, you want to change something, you want to fix something, you want to update another version. So the code is, the application is always, let's say, alive. So you want to make a change. So when you want to make a change, you don't want to break your application. So to do this, you need a way. Otherwise, I mean, if you are just a student, if you are just deploying a version of your portfolio, you don't need a complete pipeline that tests every time you change a label of your HTML. You can do this as an exercise, but you don't need that. If you have a real world application when something can break, and I think that the complexity of software, of an application, is not linear, it's exponential for the math fans. So the more features you have, the more things can break. So we need a way and to automate this process, which is like a developer creates a new say branch or a new commit, so you have something like that. Then you need to test it. Then you need to put it. Usually, you put this on a test environment, and then you put this in the production environment. Something can and after that, basically you start over again. And usually, this process should be very fast. So should not be like a waterfall process. So like we deploy, test, but this like takes months or weeks. This should be like we should be talking like about days, even hours sometimes. So the idea is to keep deploying a working version of our application instead of just try to create a whole project in once and then it works. Because you have two problems. And the first problem is that you wait a lot for longer between one version and another one. And the second problem is that if something breaks, you are in big trouble. So you can't roll back easily, and in that case, your application can stay down for a whole for a period which is longer. And again, if you're a student, nobody cares. But if a company worth $1 million, you are basically losing money if your application is down. So I think that the rollback function is one of the most important ones. So a way to go back on a previous working version, and then of course you can understand what the hell is going on, and probably nobody's going home until the bug is fixed.
Once you have some question to ask, you can go.
Yes, of course. Sorry, but I don't know which is the level. If we want to go a bit into details, we want to talk about orchestration, or we want to talk about how to get it started. Docker is not the only containerization technology. Yes.
Sir, is it possible that you could mention some of the most popular DevOps tools for our audience?
Can you repeat, please?
Some of the most popular DevOps tools for our audience.
Okay, DevOps tools. Yes, there are many. I will not mention all of them because it's impossible. I like Jenkins, which is a free, let's say I think it's a free open source tool, but basically it helps you to automate stuff. I think there are even better and paid versions, to be honest, but I like the idea that it's like open source. It has a lot of plugins. You just take whatever you want, so it helps you like to to automate something, which is something called webhooks. So basically, when something happens, something else should happen. So it's like it helps you with the logic of this automation. Other tools, I think there is the Sneak company, which is for the security of the containers. So I think it's just a tool that you can run even with the Docker CLI command. So just to discover images and containers security vulnerabilities. I've used also Ansible, which is a tool which basically simulates SSH connections with many PCs. So it uses SSH to, for example, I don't know, you want to change the IP of 100 machines. You should SSH in all of them one by one, or you can use tools by this. I think it's by Red Hat, if I'm not wrong. I don't know if we can define the Kubernetes a tool. It's more like a whole framework to orchestrate containers. So basically, once you build, of course, Docker, I don't even mention this as a tool, but of course, if once you have the image, then you can orchestrate the container. So you can have multiple replicas of the same service, of the same process. So this is like, let's say the core tools, and then I think there are many. So I would like to stick to just this simple one. I would like to start small, because otherwise I think at DevOps, even more than front end, it really starts. You can have like many different tools. One of my tools that I like is Portainer. Sometimes I make some videos for them. So it's like a tool that helps you like to deploy stuff, to check the status, for example, of your machine. It's a very visual tool, so it's very good, especially if you want to make a presentation, you want to show how things are working on. So this, for example, is another tool that I would recommend.
Thank you, sir, for telling us about these tools. I have one question, like why is there a increase in this, why DevOps has gained prominence over the last few years, and why is this this strategy being followed by different companies like Netflix and all?
I think the reason is time and money. So the having a correct pipeline process. So basically, I think that what is happening in software is what happened with like buildings, but like with buildings, it took like centuries, millennials. Instead, we are doing the same thing in like years, 10 years, 20 years, instead of 2000 years. So we are trying to build a solid process when you build the software. If you go step in the 90s, we just, I don't know, we try to make a website, then just put this on a version that I don't know even if that what version is, then that's it. The problem is the maintaining that software. Take for example what happens with banks. Banks have like some COBOL language, something super very cumbersome. I know because I've worked in some companies, and it works. Nobody's touching that software. They don't want to touch it because they are focused on, for example, money. That's it. But this, of course, this can't last forever, because, of course, if you rely on something which is very old, you can have some very strange problem, and it can work. The problem is that if you want to add something, it's really a nightmare. I feel the people over now have to change something on some very legacy code. So the code, you always have to change it. So take as an example Netflix or other new companies, they need to be very flexible. You need to be flexible. So the time and energy you spent for hiring a DevOps engineer, understanding how DevOps work, this is given back like 10 times, because then you are relaxed. For example, you use DevOps at daily.dev, and so this is the main reason. So time and money, which is basically how word works. So and I don't want to say that this is for everybody, but I think this is something which is highly in demand. So yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you for telling that. Like, what is the like approach strategy or a mindset that a project needs to be like while working on a project that needs to implement DevOps? Like, how do we approach that project with such
Nice.
DevOps?
Nice. This is a nice question. So it's the first thing is, that I recommend is to try to create the images and containers as soon as possible. So instead of creating the whole process and then let's say, okay, so let's at the end let's put a DevOps DevOps check. It's not like that. It's the earlier you work on the creation of the images, the network, even if you create, I don't know, like a Kubernetes cluster with just one service, then it's all time that you save later. So especially if you are working on a project that you want to be successful, and usually if you create a project where money is involved that you want it to be successful, otherwise you are losing money, I highly recommend to don't over-engineer that, but the earlier you start applying some concepts, and the better, because it's because let's be honest, it's always hard to add something later. We say like let's change it tomorrow, let's change it on Monday, let's change it after Easter, and then basically you don't do that. Or you can do this, but it will require like I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks. When all the team should stop and focus. Okay, so now what's going on? Instead, if you do this since the beginning, it's easier. So what I recommend is to understand the basics with a basic project, a Hello World, some CRUD operations. I'm a huge fan of, for example, CRUD API projects. I do this in different languages. I've also done this on the official Docker YouTube channel. I've done a JavaScript and Python CRUD API project, both of them connected to a DB. By the way, spoiler, you can also run a container of a DB. So instead of installing Postgres, for example, you can run a container based on a Postgres image or any DB, basically. so, so, so that's it. And I would not, I would not create everything. Sorry, I don't feel very well. I would not create everything in one moment. Sorry.
No issue, sir. Please take your time.
Let's say I would not create everything inside an image. So the idea is to create different applications that then are connected and they should talk each other, but not to work everything like it's in a single folder or in a single application. If you have a DB, that should be a separate container. Probably a buzzword that you have heard is microservices. I'm intentionally not mention this in the introduction, otherwise it becomes a mess. But the idea should be that you should have smaller applications interacting each other for many reasons. One is the reusability. For example, I don't know if you have an application which simulates the authentication, you can use this for different types of applications, different projects. So the idea is that the more we can separate and create these single units of software, and this is the perfect use case for a container, for an image, and then we run the container based on that image. So that's it.
Okay, sir. So like there like we can like have some few questions at the end like for this event. So Ankit, you have some last few questions. Just ask as fast as you can. Like since sir is
Hello,
also
sir.
having.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Actually, the thing is that I'm new to development as a freshman. So, would like to know, say for example, if I'm learning about development, how well can I switch to DevOps? Because I would like to have like a roadmap, I could say, of any student. Say for example, I'm in college, I'm in first year, and how would I go into the area of DevOps? So, what are skills? What are prerequisites? What are stuff I need to know? So, could you tell a
Okay.
roadmap of sorts?
Yes, I've also made a thread on Twitter on this. I think I'll find this and now I'll post this, I don't know, today or later. I know because this is the question that I get often. So first of all, if you are DevOps, you don't stop coding. It means that you are more focused on the operation stuff. So putting the application in production. Instead, if you are just, let's say, a developer, you don't have to focus on putting the code in production, for example. But now this is more like what happened like 20, 30 years ago, like that a developer, I don't know, I just focus on the CSS, I'm happy with that, someone else will do the job. And now it's not more like that. Also, the people who are very experienced in front end and CSS, they also know how to deploy something. For example, you can using Vercel. I'm also the mag, sorry. So it doesn't mean that you will not stop coding. I will focus on your favorite backend technology. So instead, let's say that I don't know if you are experienced with have some experience with backend, yes or not, I don't know. But
so I'm new to it. I'm new to it.
Okay, so the idea is if you want to focus, so I would recommend to start with a backend technology because a container makes sense if there is an application. So, like a containerize a Node application, containerize a Java Spring application, containerize a Django application. So, learning DevOps without having some basics of, for example, backend, you can make some examples. You can run some Linux machines, but in my opinion, it's better to start understanding, I don't know, some CRUD API with your favorite technology. Once you understand that, you understand how to containerize that single application. And then you decide if you like the idea of containerization, you want to focus on containerizing different applications, even if you're not a master in that language. I don't know. I can containerize, a .NET application, even if I'm not a super experienced .NET developer. This can be your case. Instead, if you want to learn different backend technologies, in that case, you are a backend developer, and then you know, for example, how to containerize one or some of them. So if you want to pursue the DevOps path, which I think it's not bad, I would focus on less technologies, but then you understand that you use them how to understand. So backend technology with CAD applications, connections with a DB, so understanding how the connections with a DB also in a container works. And then, yes, deploy something with Docker locally. You can arrive at reach a point when you have something called the Docker Compose, which helps you to run different services on the same machine. It's a development tool, but it can be really useful to understand the stuff. And then you step on the orchestration part, which is, let's say, Kubernetes nowadays. And then you, with those images, you try to, even if you just use Kubernetes on just one server, it's good to understand the concepts, the pods, the network. So that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable time, and keeping in mind your current medical condition, we would like to end the session a bit early. And since we were really excited to have you on our platform, and the whole team got a bit upset when we got to know you got COVID, because we knew that the session would not be go with your usual energy. And so
I'm sorry, but this is but we can make this a good thing. So since I haven't done my 100%, if you invite me again, I'll come back. So I come two times instead of one. What do you think?
Yes, sir. We'll love to have you another time, sir.
Let's make it
It
good.
would be an honor.
Nice.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable.
Perfect.
Thank you for your valuable time.
So maybe next time we can talk, because I think talking about DevOps and Web3 in the same talk with me, that I'm a huge fan of DevOps, it's hard because I like DevOps so much that basically I will talk for this literally for years, even if I'm ill. I just want to say that if I will not be positive on Tuesday, I'll go on Ethereum Amsterdam. And just because I want to announce something, I think on Twitter I haven't announced this yet, but I think at the end of May I'll be a public speaker in Poland for a Web3 event in person. I think it's called Code Europe, the event, which is, I think, the biggest tech event in Poland. So this is a fast preview of what's going on. So, for example, we can make this other event before this. I think I'll create an introduction to Solidity talk. For example, we can make an exercise. I can make this preview, or maybe we can talk about something else, whatever. Okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you for your valuable time. And we really love talking to you. And we would really love to have you once again, because since we are from India and it is a growing technology hub, students here love DevOps and Web3. They are just trying to explore things as much as possible. And so we would love to invite more and more number of crowd to your sessions. We were really excited to have you. And we are really glad that you came up in even after having COVID, you came for the event. We really appreciate your spirit and we really loved it. And so thank you, sir. And that's it. And we pray for your speedy recovery.
Nice. Thank you so much. And it's not a secret that I like people from India. I think that I say this every single day on on Twitter. So, of course, I like everyone, but especially, let's say, people from India. So thank you so much for your support. I don't know if some of you, they already follow me on Twitter. If you want, you can find me somewhere. And yes, just let's keep in touch. I want to say that I'm also always learning, creating content. So I highly recommend, for example, to get started. If you want to learn DevOps, just the last word. Do you have 1 more minute?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, for example, when I learned DevOps and Docker, I've done this privately. So I've done this like in this room, dark room with a black hoodie. I don't have a hoodie now, but I've learned this privately, in private. And this was very tough for me. So understand the things, I got stuck for days. So at the end I made it, but it was very hard. With Web3, I'm learning in public. So I'm sharing every day on Twitter. I'm doing Twitter spaces. I'm doing this in a more public way. It works way, way better. So if now you want to learn DevOps, highly recommend to don't do what I've done, but learn this in public by sharing your experience, even if you're not an expert yet, because it's a huge word. So start from the basics. Start, I don't know, share some Docker tips, share what you have done, share some stuff, because this helps you to get a solid understanding. DevOps, it's a lot about understanding how the little things work, because there are many parts. So it's less coding, let's say, in the common sense, but more understanding how things work. So highly recommend creating content out of that. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
So,
sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir. And we will conclude the session.
Namaste.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste, sir.